Welcome back, adventurers. Well, this week you're in for a real treat as we deep dive into the good, the bad and the ugly of performance catamarans. Hold on to your hats as we cover serious risks that you take in sailing a lightweight catamaran, as well as the disadvantages to comfortable living. We also correct some errors in published Portofino 52 performance data and expose the limitations of only using simple mathematical formulas in trying to compare performance catamarans that have many other variations to consider for real accuracy. It's controversial stuff, so kick off your shoes and come barefoot with us to find out more. We are John and Ali, the Barefoot Doctors, sailing and travelling around the globe. Join us as we share the adventure and explore the beauty of the world. Because life is better barefoot. Well, hi folks, welcome back to another edition of Barefoot Doctor Sailing, and it's an exciting one because we're going to share some stuff with you today in this episode about light displacement that is not so great. You know, there's been a lot of hoo-ha out there in the YouTube world at the moment about light displacements and how fantastic it is and grading. So we really feel we're in a position to actually make a call on this because we've had both. We've actually had a light displacement boat of less than 10 tonnes, what it was about 7 or 8.
Yeah, 8 loaded.
For 20 years. So we feel we're in a pretty good position to make some pretty serious calls here. Some of the stuff that we're going to talk about is going to upset some people, and we're quite prepared for that because all we're doing is giving some people some insight or some much more rounded information about the pros and cons, the fors and against and all that kind of stuff, because really what's out there at the moment is kind of a little bit one-sided. Let's take a holistic look at light displacement. So that's really what our video is about today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the thing about light displacement is absolutely fantastic in some areas, but there are disadvantages, and you really need to be aware of those disadvantages, and some of them are safety and some of them are comfort. So we're going to talk about this because just talking about figures and lightweight boats without actually discussing the negatives about it might be misleading in terms of the broader picture of actually living aboard.
And it's a bit of a hot topic at the moment. So I suggest you go get a cup of coffee or whatever poison you have that you enjoy, kick off your shoes, and let's get into it. An all-rounded approach would be what?
While some people will talk purely about the performance data and focus only on the performance of a boat, it's a well-known concept, this triangle of cost, performance and comfort. And all those three aspects are really at the corners of this triangle. And as you move towards one particular side of that, you get worse results than the other sides. Mm-hmm. So, for example, if you focus only on performance, you lose out on comfort and you lose out on cost. It gets much more expensive. As you move towards comfort, you lose out on performance, and obviously you can get much cheaper boats, but the more performance products you put on board, it gets more expensive. All of the boats are in this triangle at some point, and where they go is really a personal judgment. So I'm not going to be rude enough to say this boat goes there, but very clearly everybody will know the heavier comfort boats, lagoons, Barleys, Fontaine Pajots, sit in the comfort side, and you walk on board one of those boats, especially the lagoons, they are huge voluminous boats. So the big heavy comfort boats don't sail as well as the thinner, lighter performance boats, obviously, but they are wonderful for living aboard and they give you a huge amount of space. So people walk on board, they look around and they fall in love with them and they buy them, and these are the biggest selling boats in the world. So given that they're the most successful brands in the world, they are filling a niche. So let's just be clear about what we're talking about. There are people that want this and there are people that want that. There is no right and wrong, there are just different choices. Mm-hmm. Now, on the one hand, we have obviously had the 8-ton performance catamaran for 20 years. We then moved on to a Leopard 50 and then a Leopard 45. So we know the classic cruising comfort boat, and we've been on the light displacement boat, and we are very well placed to share with people the pros and cons of both, because we have lived, cruised and sailed long distances on both boats. The common misconception that is being portrayed is that the heavier cruising boats don't sail well. I think they actually sail surprisingly well. We did a 7,500 mile journey from Cape Town to the USA in a Leopard 50, and the average speed of that boat was 7.6 knots over that whole 7,500 miles. So that is quite good. And when we were sailing alongside some high performance boats like the Balance, we were level pegging with them. We were gaining some days and losing some days, but it wasn't that they were racing off streets ahead of us. At the end of the day, you make your choice and all the boats function. The reason we needing to talk about this is that light displacement isn't all good. There are negatives, and you have to be aware of those negatives if you're going to buy one.
I think it's really important to understand that there are misconceptions out there that light displacement boats are the be-all and end-all. In fact, it's horses for courses, and you buy a boat that's suitable to your kind of sailing, your personality, the type of things that you're comfortable doing, and the lifestyle you want to have.
And your desires.
As I said before, there's a lot of hoo-ha, there's a lot of comparisons, there's a lot of poking the bear and competition out there. We want to say, and we've said it before, it's not a competition. People sail for the love of it. They sail because they enjoy it, they want that lifestyle. It's not all about a competition.
There's no right and wrong boat for anybody. So people that are trying to say this is better than that, well, it's all a choice.
The thing is too, people are getting their backs up about what boat is better than this boat. At the end of the day, it's a little disappointing that sailors are behaving in such a way that they're making people's personal choices a competition of what's good and what's bad. It's very unsailorish, and it's a little disappointing, I must say. We want to reiterate to all of you new sailors out there that are looking at YouTubes for the first time, and you know, coming across this YouTube and that YouTube. Generally, the sailing community is very supporting, very non-judgmental, happy-go-lucky, easy, kick back, yeah, whatever you want, you know, that suits you, and we all get on as a community.
Even monohulls and multi-hulls.
That's right.
We actually like monohull sailors as well.
And everybody understands that everybody sails as a choice in life, not because one boat is better than the other. You can be swinging off the pick in an anchorage and there be multiple boats that you yourself wouldn't choose, but you know that that particular cruiser loves that boat for whatever reason they chose that boat for. And it's not very sailorish to be judging a person for what kind of boat they're choosing to invest their money in and in their lifestyle. The sailing community is one of the most amazing, supportive communities that you could ever want to involve yourself in. So for all those people out there that are coming across those YouTubes that are denigrating other YouTubers and being downright rude and nasty, that's not how the sailing community actually operates. There is more to take into consideration than sometimes what people are producing on their YouTube channel. Be
careful not to go down a pathway based on an isolated individual, a small number of people that are saying absolutely this is absolutely the best way to go. Always find a broad range of views, get information from knowledgeable sailors that have done it before, don't have any vested interests.
And also have a lot of experience about what they're talking about under their belt.
Try to get as much information from as many people, and then also speak specifically to the people that sail that boat to find out exactly what it's like, because there are things that the promoters of a specific type of boat are not going to tell you. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about the pros and cons of lightweight catamarans, and that will probably fill you in on all this more important information, I think. So let's talk about the advantages of a lightweight catamaran.
It's clear when you have a lightweight boat, usually it's going to sail faster. You're going to able to race, away from weather. It's really good in that respect. We have done that many, many times. It also results in shorter passages. So in light winds, you can still make way, but with a heavier boat, you might have to put the engine on. So it has all these great advantages for sure, and we have enjoyed every single one of them over the last 20 years.
And I suppose the other aspect is that with a lightweight performance catamaran, you also get very exciting sailing. Mm-hmm. You can be screaming along at 15 or 20 knots if you want, and that is thrilling and very exciting.
For some.
So let's now draw the line, sort of move over onto the disadvantages. So just in terms of the exciting sailing, Exciting sailing is great for a limited length of time. If you're doing an ocean crossing, you do not want high adrenaline for 3 weeks. You want to make it easy. You want to be able to sit, have a cup of coffee, not have to be nervous about is there going to be a gust. So the downside of the high performance catamarans is that they can be scary. They can be really, really scary.
And you have to be on the sails
on the ball
a lot of the time, don't you? Because if there's a change in wind with a light catamaran, you have to be onto it.
Yeah.
With a heavier catamaran, it's a little bit more forgiving, if you like.
The lightweight catamarans are more at risk of capsize, and they do. They do capsize. I've never heard of a leopard or a lagoon capsizing ever, but certainly there are fairly consistent reports of the light displacement boats capsizing because their risk of capsize is so much greater. So if you have the wrong sails up and a gust comes along, hits you from the side with a lightweight catamaran, if you don't do the right thing, you can capsize, and people do. So this is a significant risk, and that's why it can become scary. What have you found that is not so nice about being on a nice, fast, exciting catamaran?
Well, yeah, it sure is fast and exciting, but the disadvantages is it can be very jittery. Like a lightweight boat is not going to cut through the water the same as a heavier boat. So you find you're bouncing around and it's jittery and it can be very uncomfortable, particularly on long ocean crossings.
Yeah, and it's worse when there's more swell. So the more waves you have a lightweight boat lifting up with each wave and then crashing into the next one. With Alberdash, it was only 42 foot, so it's a shorter boat, but it had with certain wavelengths, we would go up over one wave, almost take off, and then dive down into the next wave. Yeah, we would lift green water up over the bow, up over the saloon deck, and dump us in the steering station. It's just not pleasant being
very
that
bouncy.
wet.
The lighter the boat, the more jittery, the more bouncy, and it tends to be the more uncomfortable the faster you go, which is why you want a light boat, because you want to go fast, right?
Yeah, and so if we're talking about speed and discomfort at high speeds, when you go faster and faster, the hull noise gets phenomenal. You know, the noise inside the hull increases exponentially, I believe. At 12 knots on our Cat, it was quite comfortable. At 15 knots, the noise downstairs was unpleasant for sleeping, really. So when we were sailing, if we were going in a reasonably strong wind and we could do 15 knots in a swell, we would certainly slow down to 12 knots to reduce the hull noise for the people sleeping in the bunks below. In flat water, absolutely wonderful, because you have much less hull noise. You're just skimming along the top, and we could do 16 or 18 knots, no problems at all. And if it's in the daytime, we've got the spinnaker up. We've also done 60 miles in 3 hours on our catamaran. Absolutely thrilling. But after 3 hours of that, I had enough, and I was quite happy that we'd arrived at our destination and take the sails down and have a rest. Because it's really thrilling.
That adrenaline's not good for your body long term. It's okay for short bursts, but long term, that adrenaline can lead to coronary heart disease, which is not a good thing.
So when you're sailing, you really want to be able to chill and relax, because when the weather does get bad, you've got to then heighten your awareness and activity to deal with whatever problem arises. So having that ability to calm is obviously good. And obviously on a performance cat, you get rough weather, it will be probably more stressful than in a heavier performance cat. When the weather gets good, the performance cat is wonderful. You're sailing along in 12 knots of wind or 15 knots of wind, whoopee-doo. But as soon as it starts getting rough and 25 knots, then... And it's really continuous, like you cannot stop the boat dancing over the waves if you're going at 15 or 18 knots. Yeah, if you're going to get a high-performance lightweight cat, that is something you should experience before you pay the money for a performance cat. So some products also transmit the noise much more intensely than others, between carbon, GRP, aluminium, and all the other glasses in between. Some boats' hulls actually inherently have more noise transmission than others. So get on board that boat that you want to buy and see what it's actually like for you. Compare sleeping on the Leopard 50 from sleeping on the Performance Cat.
Okay, well, sleeping on the Performance Cat, you move a lot more, because it's so easy to move a lightweight catamaran that it seems to swoosh around a lot more than a heavier catamaran, and you tend to hear every noise, even when you're on the dock, and it's a lot less calm sleeping on a performance cat than it is on a heavy cat. For instance, on the Leopard 50, often it felt like you're in an apartment.
It was so calm.
It was so calm,
Flat
and even if it was a bit windy outside,
it would sit.
And you would have comfort at anchor. Not so much so on a performance cat.
So, and obviously we have mentioned this before, but performance cats have got vertical hulls and they're designed to be thin and narrow, less volume, therefore the amount of space you have inside is less. Therefore the bunks are less, therefore you have less space in the cabins, and there's all that loss of comfort that comes with a performance cat. And along with that lack of volume, you also usually have much less carrying capacity. As a cruiser, we tend to gather a whole heap of absolute beep, and we don't want to let it go. I don't want to throw away my
tools.
The half-used up paint of, I was going to say acetone, but not acetone.
Not acetone. But you get the idea.
Half-used paint of this and half-used bottle of gel coat or whatever it is. Yeah. You tend not to want to throw it away because it's a waste.
I just
need that little part.
What you take there is what's on offer, basically, especially in places like the Bahamas where, isolated islands and things like that.
Yeah.
So you tend to accumulate little bits and pieces of stuff that tend to weigh the boat down.
So when you're in a light performance cat, you're much more limited to being able to carry that sort of stuff, as well as much more limited in carrying your toys, because the performance cat is going to be more negatively affected for the performance than the heavier cats, which are already got low performance, so they don't perform that much worse. It's a much slower angle of degradation of their performance. So you have much more carrying capacity typically in a heavier cat. Absolutely, we don't dispute cats are very weight sensitive, but a performance cat with thin hull is much more weight sensitive than a fat cruising cat that is built for comfort.
And then when you get onto a bigger, thicker catamaran, heavier catamaran, you don't have to worry. You don't have to worry quite so much, but you're still sensitive to weight in any catamaran.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever told people. I used to race monohulls, so I was the 4-decky on this high performance monohull, and we did 2 Sydney Hobarts and multiple races up and down the coast, out to the Solomons and long, like 1,000-mile ocean races. When you're a racer on a monohull, you're only allowed to bring along one small towel. Like that's and it's a chamois that you squeeze so it doesn't carry weight. You're only the clothes that you're wearing. There was all these rules, but so I'm used to actually restricting what I take on board. When you're dealing with performance, weight is critical. If you want to keep your wife happy or your partner or your girlfriend, guess what? A high performance boat is very, very unlikely to do it for her. There are some girls that like to sail on boats like that, but generally if you don't have the comforts on board, washing machine, hairdryer, watermaker to wash, do the hair, blow dry.
And the performance boat that we had for 20 years didn't have all the bells and whistles because we kept it all light.
But we didn't have watermakers, so we had to be frugal. When we were cruising Vanuatu and Indonesia, we had...
Just filling up big water jerry cans and, fuel jerry cans and pumping and doing all that. And, when you've done that for 20 years, suddenly...
You're strong.
Oh, you are. You are stronger. But it gets to a point...
Good exercise, honey. Come on, you can do it.
It gets to a point for most women, and you don't want to do it so tough.
There is another major risk with lightweight performance catamarans, which has medical implications, which is anxiety. Do you want to talk about the development of anxiety because people are sailing on high performance catamarans that cause them huge amount of stress?
And sometimes it can sneak up on you. You don't even realise, but over a period of time while sailing on a high performance catamaran and having to be always on red alert and, always on, it can start to take an effect on your body and on your mind. Or you can have experiences that are very nerve-wracking, that are one-offs, that leave you with PTSD. Then you've got to deal with that. It can be a health risk that can develop into a significant medical problem. which we've seen. We've counselled many people with that same condition on all types of different boats, but mainly on performance.
If people have enough insight into seeing the behavior of certain individuals on YouTube, there are significant anxiety problems that have been created by individuals sailing on lightweight catamarans that are very well known. This is a real problem. That's why I keep on suggesting go sailing on these boats before you make the decision. And when people do that, often they change their mind. The O'Kellys crossing the Atlantic on the Outremer, after that... Wasn't for them, because suddenly they saw all those disadvantages, the stress, the performance, probably the noise, all these things that we're talking about became very obvious to them, and they said, that isn't what we want. We want a more comfortable life. We want to be able to sail fast, but easily. I don't want
with comfort.
And with comfort, and I don't want to be stressed about having to worry about a wind gust coming. I want to be able to get the performance to do 12 knots, hopefully 14, and do it easily with a cup of coffee, sitting at the helm, and if we need to trim or adjust the sails, we don't have to rush and be thinking, oh my God, we're going to capsize.
You kind of been there, done that with a lot of the racing, high performance catamarans, and now it's that even middle ground where we want to go fast, but we want to have comfort too, and we want to do it safely.
Yeah.
And that's where the Portofino sits for us. And speaking of Portofino,
I mean, it was unfortunate that the Portofino 52 got some really ridiculous ratings on one of the other YouTube channels, and we just need to correct this error. On Sailing into Freedom, the figures that we used for the Portofino calculations were actually wrong, because the boat was redesigned to be lighter. So while the figures were being used on out-of-date numbers, we have looked at the figures and corrected them. There's various calculations that people can use, and they're usually always based on sail area, displacement, and waterline length. And they take various calculations from various forms of that. But basically, you're only dealing with 3 parameters, and that doesn't even look at hull shape. Do you have daggerboards that lift up? What is the shape of your hull? So they will judge a lagoon, the big, large, round hull compared to a Portofino with a narrow, thin hull, and they'll rate them the same because of the waterline length, which is clearly totally ludicrous. So when people say the figures don't lie, well, actually they do.
Give an example of when the figures do lie.
Moving away from the sailing field, the figures that lie from the medical side are the BMI, the body mass index. This is the gold standard for measuring whether you're a good weight, mildly overweight, obese, or grossly obese. And you should be between 20 and 25, and this is based on your height and your weight. But unfortunately, what it doesn't take into consideration is your body form. So if you're very muscular and very like a sports person that's very well built, if you're a bodybuilder that's won Mr. Universe, you're going to have a BMI that's probably going to be 30 or 32. So you look at the figures and you're probably going to be obese.
He was. I mean, he wasn't obese fat, but he was calculated at being obese. Now, this is a bodybuilder that is fitter than your average bear, not one scrap of fat because he's been in competitions, and he was termed as obese. Clearly, the figures do lie. Yes,
let's look at the graph that was produced. So the figures can be significantly misleading. Now, whether this is because wrong figures are put in or because the figures are not taking everything into consideration. If we look at some of the examples of these boats on this graph, the Privilege 49 is said to be as fast as the HH50. The Privilege 49 is a big, heavy, comfy boat and will never sail the speed of the HH.
Big fat. You can't. I can't. It's a very comfortable...
The Privilege is a very large, wide, heavy displacement cruiser, and there's no way that it'll keep up with an HH50. I'm sorry, this is totally ridiculous. Let's look at the Bali 48. Now the Bali, they're actually quite honest in giving their polars to people, because I got a set. They admit they only sail at 6 knots or 4 knots, depending on the wind speed. But the Bali 48 is said to be faster than the Leopard 48 and 45. Well, completely ludicrous, because The Leopard 45 I can do in 6 knots of wind, I can do 4 knots of boat speed, and at 8 knots of wind I can do 6 knots of boat speed. We do very good boat speeds on the Leopards, and it sails upwind phenomenally well. The Outremer on this graph is higher than the balance boats, and yet the balance VPPs or polars are better than the Outremers. Now, Outremer does not publish their polars. These figures that are just calculations on limited facts take no consideration of the hull shape, take no consideration of the underwing, take no consideration of the windage. So clearly they are grossly lacking in making a valid judgment across the board. When we've corrected our figures because the channel was doing it wrong, our figures come up to the same level as Dallas's new boat, but he has fixed keels and we have lifting keels, but that isn't taken into consideration in these calculations either. Now, if we've got no keels done, are we going to go faster than a boat with fixed keels? Well, I would expect so. But that's not taken into consideration. But if you look at our polars, which are the best gold standard for calculating predicted speeds, our performance data is absolutely amazing. Now, it may not be as good as that in real life, because what I've heard is that even the racing boats, they have their polars put through the same program and they come out a little bit lower. But even a little bit lower than this, we're still sailing at 12 and 14 and 15 knots a lot of the time.
How did the yacht designers view these calculations?
What the boat designers actually stated, and this is one of the comments on online as well from a boat designer, is that these boat calculations are generally used by amateurs. The people who are serious about boat design use VPPs and get all the other parameters worked out much more in detail, because these simple figures are so lacking in taking into consideration other factors. Now, the VPPs or the polars actually look at the hull shape, so they measure the drag at different speeds, and so that's going to be a much more accurate guide than just looking at waterline length. So the professional use VPPs, and VPPs are much more accurate than these simple calculations that are being thrown around. If you want to know how your boat performs, get your polars done. But of course, some people don't want to pay the money to put their boat figures through the program.
Which we did. We actually paid money to have our figures generated before we even signed on the line, actually. We wanted to make sure that this boat was going to do what we wanted it to do.
And I mean, the other thing to point out is the polars aren't going to be 100% accurate anyway. You know, they are the best calculated estimation based on all those figures that they can put into the computer, but they can't put in everything, and they don't make allowances for how the boat handles over waves and a few other things like that.
So for all of you guys out there that are new to YouTube and are looking for a boat for the first time or don't really know what to do, the gold standard, the ones you should be looking at are the polars. They're the ones with the most accurate information, all-rounded information that are going to get you an idea of the boat that you're looking at, not particularly these other ones that are missing a lot of information.
Yeah, and then there's two types of polars, so let's get into some specifics here. There's polars that are produced by the computer that I said doesn't take into consideration certain other facts that they can't computerize, and there's polars produced by boats actually on the water. So you need to say to the salespeople, are these polars based on actual performance, or are these based on the computer generated model? The short story is these figures are very misleading, and really they need to be taken with a grain of salt, and don't base your whole future based on simplistic calculations like this, because they don't have that value, guys. And also, I suppose the other thing that's completely misleading is a black line through the middle saying these are good and those are bad. It doesn't work like that. It's a progressive range of boats. Maybe starts from black at the bottom, goes grey in the middle, and then goes lighter to the top, but there is no cutoff. There's no black line. And then the other thing is, if you were to graph comfort, these graphs would be exactly the opposite way around. If you were to graph safety or likelihood of capsize, exactly the same. The boats at the top of this graph of the KSP would be the ones highest likely to capsize. It's not all bubbles and rainbows. There is a downside to this high performance. Once you've sailed across a big ocean with big seas in a light boat, you will know what I'm talking about. So please do it before you buy a boat like this, to make sure that boat's for you.
Very important, guys.
In response to the numbers don't lie people, well, no, they probably do actually. for a number of reasons, they're not
accurate.
Not accurate, guys. Okay, I want to talk about something very exciting because our boat is 16 tons light displacement. We'll add a few things. The polars that we've had for our boat are calculated 18.5 tons because we're going to have nice, exciting comfort things. We're going to have a lifting platform.
So when you come on board, you're going to feel really comfortable as well.
So on the Portofino, I've got lots of exciting stuff which will increase the boat from the 16-ton base weight. My expectation for this boat is that it's going to sail smoothly and comfortably through the water without being jittery because it's a heavier performance cat. But our performance figures from the polars are really good. The extra weight will also significantly reduce our risk of capsize, so we're going to be a lot more relaxed. Elizabeth's going to be happy sleeping on a calm, stable bed at night. We're going to be going over the water.
No mental health issues.
Well, I hope so. That's how we came to make this decision, and the Seawind 1600 is in that same category. It's about 13 tons, I believe, but this CEO of Seawind also said they specifically wanted their performance cat to be a little bit heavier so it wasn't at such risk of capsize. This is an active decision you need to be aware of. So when you're making that decision about what boat you want, you can be fully informed about the risks and the benefits of each situation. And again, at the end of the day, it's your call what you want, it's our call what we want, and as long as we're all happy, that's fine. We're all winners. We've said that before.
So guys, I hope that was informative for you and you got a lot out of it and you can understand the performance and what you've got to take into consideration when you're looking for a cat.
Yeah, the pros and cons of performance cats are not just about the performance. There are other very important factors that need to be considered. So I hope you enjoyed it, guys. All the best.
Bye from us. We hope you liked this week's episode. We would love to know what you thought and what you found the most interesting. Let us know in the comments below, as we love it when you do. Also, thanks to our awesome Patreons for helping us help others in need. Until next week, guys, hold fast to your dreams, for like the wind in the sails, they propel you towards endless possibilities.